All right, here's a episode I'm hoping to replace the old kind of synopsis build video that I had done real quick. Figured I'd start it with it just idling. I just did another oil change. I've done a few so far since the build. I've got 12,000 miles on it so far, and I do oil changes about every 3,000 miles. I could get into my reasons why here in a second, but I figured I'd do a quick little, just kind of showing it idle. We'll go ahead and turn it off now. All right. So, we'll do a quick little synopsis of the build. I made a video previously, but for some reason the angle of the phone made some of the video small. I don't know why, but I'm going to go ahead and try to replicate that video now and just kind of give an overall synopsis of the build and parts used. So those that don't know, and I'm putting this as a watch first kind of video of the build, we ended up with a L83 Gen 5 LT, which is the 5.3. This one specifically was from a Silverado. I'm running an 8L90 and a Silverado transfer case. If you want the truck to work like stock, you are going to need a Gen 5 LT. The main reason is the ECM. The ECMs on the LSs do not marry to the electrical architecture of the Colorado, so it won't marry to the other modules and give it correct information for everything else to work. Things like your AC, your ABS, with modern CAN bus systems, they need information from all the modules to kind of work. I think the 1516 Colorado has the older architecture, and you may be able to get the LS to partially work. From my understanding, there's still a few systems that won't work, but it's a lot. You can actually get it to marry up better than a 17 plus. The 17 plus, you won't even get it to connect, and you probably won't even be able to start it. You might be able to start it, you won't be able to control anything else. You'll have to go full standalone, and then nothing else is pretty much going to work. So that's kind of an overall summary of what engine you're going to kind of want to need. Transmission, I picked the 8L90. It came with the engine that I bought. You can probably get away with a 6-speed. The 6L, what is that? The 6L 8090. I forget the final number. I think the difference is 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive. You could probably run that and not have an issue as long as you're wired for it. With the 8-speed, you're going to have an external TCM, which is in the same location as the Colorado. It's actually the same T87A. The Silverado ECM will fit in the Colorado ECM location, so it'll look factory. The 6-speed has an internal TCM, so it has to be wired for that. So your wiring harness will have to reflect what transmission you use. I have talked to somebody who got a 10-speed to work. The 10L 8090, I think the difference is 2-wheel drive, 4-wheel drive. The only issue he has is over 8th gear, because the other modules, ABS, all the stuff that runs StabiliTrak, they are programmed for an 8-speed. And once you go above 8th gear, it has no idea what to do because it doesn't know what to look for when it has the 9th and 10th gears being engaged. So he does have some issues when, driving on the highway and it hits those higher gears, he starts getting lights. I haven't talked to him in a while. I'm not sure if he's got that figured out or not, but for me, simplicity, I would probably recommend the 8-speed. Just because it's what was in the truck before. The 8L90 and the 8L45, which is in the V6 Colorado, they're essentially pretty much the same in a design aspect. The housing is different on the 8L90, but the internals are the same when it comes to dimensions, they're the same. From my understanding, you could put 8L90 components in an 8L45 to kind of beef it up. So the internal mechanisms and workings are essentially the same. It's just the components being beefed up is what differentiates the 8L45 and the 8L90. So that's kind of the drivetrain that I'm running, and some of the drivetrain options you can have. This Gen 5 LT, there is a 5.3, the 6.2, and the 6.6. The 6.6 is an iron block. I mean, if you're going to be pumping tons of power, you might want to go that way just for the strength. I don't really see building a Colorado that big. I mean, you're probably going to be getting into a little bit more than what I need. So most people are probably going to do the 5.3 or the 6.2. Dimensionally, they are the same. The outside part and the dimensions, it'll look the exact same as this. The only difference is the internal, the piston obviously is bigger and the heads are different. To create that bigger combustion chamber to basically be a 6.2. I'm actually running, this is a 6.2 intake manifold. So I'm actually running a 6.2 intake manifold throttle body. We'll kind of just get into the components I'm using. So just went over that. This is actually a Volant intake for a Gen 1 V8 Colorado. The inlet size here is the exact same size as the 6.2 throttle body for the Gen 5 LT engine. So it bolts right up. I did drill a hole and did a nutsert to basically mount this box. Other than that, this is just sitting in there just like it would factory. I am running swap manifolds. They are Hooker Blackheart. They will work for 5.3 or 6.2. They bolt up the same. So essentially at the end of the day, I could literally pull this entire block, buy a 6.2 block heads and fuel system, and throw this intake and manifolds on and drop it right in and basically have a 6.2. I'll just have to reprogram the ECM. Let's see what else on the top. So I'm running a catch can. I did switch. I am running a 2019 Gen 5 LT driver's side valve cover. The reason for that is I did do a stage 1 high lift cam to do an AFM DOD delete and to just get a little bit more power. So let's get some light in here. Because of that, the valley cover has the DOD solenoids from the factory. 3 of them were leaking on mine. I had some internal oil pressure issues, which is covered in a video. And to kind of alleviate that, I'm running an ICT billet valley cover, which removes the solenoids, but it also does not have the PCV. On a factory one, the PCV would be right here. I did do the oil pressure adapter that they sell for that, so I'm running the oil pressure sensor in the same stock location, and then I'm running the PCV off of the valve cover, which that was changed in the 2019 Plus Gen 5 LTs. So all I did was replace the valve cover. This is now the PCV, goes into the catch can, and then goes in past the throttle body, just like the factory. The factory would have had it just come from up there to there, and then you would plumb a catch can in between if you wanted to. I used to have the brake booster into the vacuum of the PCV, but I removed it, and now it's just running the stock Colorado vacuum pump. So brake boost vacuum is all mechanical, or all, I guess you could say, separate now from the engine vacuum. It gets it now just from the pump. From my understanding, it doesn't need this unless DoD AFM kicks on, which is why a lot of the newer vehicles have electronic vacuum pump. The Gen 5 LT does have a mechanical vacuum pump, but it's been deleted on this. I'll go into that a little bit when I cover accessories. So yeah, right now I'm just running the electric vacuum pump. I haven't had any issues with the brakes. I did that because I had some issues we thought were related to vacuum when I was doing some tuning. Let's see. Other than that, that's the stock fuel evap from the Gen 5 LT, and I have it plumbed down into the Colorado system down below. Nothing really changed over here. The wiring harness goes into the fuse box from the engine. That was supplied. I bought that from Current Performance. They do a swap integrated harness where plugs right into the fuse box and then into the plug down there. And that's what sends it to the rest of the modules and basically makes the truck work like stock. All right, let's go down to accessories. So I am running 2016 Camaro accessories. The Camaro has a 6.2 Gen 5 LT in it. So all these accessories on the front are from a 6.2. So once again, if I want to, I can pull the block, bolt all these onto the 6.2 block, and have a 6.2. So I have a Camaro water pump, Camaro alternator. Actually, it's the truck alternator. It actually fits on the bracketry for the Camaro. So that's actually from the 5.3 motor. I did have to clock the alternator where I had to take the back part of it apart and twist it and then rebolt it to move the plug. The plug was initially hitting the frame there, so by turning it and doing a little bit of shaving of a tab on the block, I was able to run that alternator with no issue. Camaro tensioner, Camaro balancer, and Camaro AC compressor. I'm running I believe it's an LS AC compressor manifold that bolts onto the AC compressor with a screw fitting. I don't know if we could see that maybe through here. It's kind of hard, but it bolts to the top. This line with the silver is one of my custom lines. So I have two custom lines coming off of that. One goes there up to this fitting, which was from the Colorado. I cut it off, bought a new ferrule. The ferrule is this piece right here. That's what they call it. You can get a crimper. I've got a new hose going to this and new ferrule, crimped it right to the Colorado fitting. There is an adapter about halfway because the manifold is, I believe, a little bit bigger. So I have a reducer fitting so that the hose goes to a size that would fit the factory Colorado fitting there. This one's stock from the V6. And then I have this one here that comes down there. So there's a ferrule. There's a fitting. It's a T-fitting that has the sensor. Current will provide the plug for that. That's the sensor. It's in the parts list. I forget who I got that from, but it's basically a T-fitting that has a threaded portion so that you could attach the sensor, crimp that in there, and then it goes down into here that's the factory V6 fitting that goes and attaches to the AC condenser. It's basically where this line and this line meet at the AC condenser. I am running the factory Colorado radiator. Those that don't know, the 2017 Plus has a different radiator than the 1516. You have the upper is on the passenger side. The 1516, the upper is on the driver's side, and the bottom is reversed as well. So I'm running, I have it in the parts list, but this is actually a section of a radiator hose. I kind of made a hose using several different fittings and took it up to my local auto parts store, and they let me sit back there, and I basically went through all the hoses until I found one that had a section like this so I can make it one piece. I have the part number in the parts list. I believe this is from a Chrysler Sebring. I think it's like a lower radiator hose, and it's like a middle section of it. So I just cut the ends off, and it fits right in there perfect. The lower, I don't know if we can kind of see that down there. The lower is from a convertible Camaro. The convertible Camaro has a T-fitting there that goes to the oil cooler. Basically all I did was remove that T-fitting and put a coupler, a straight coupler. The part is in the parts list, and it bolts right up. Goes right into the radiator and right into the water pump over here. Couldn't beat that. Steam line. So there's the factory steam line that goes to the radiator. There's a steam line that comes off of the thermostat. That is a new hose. I just got some, I don't even remember what kind of hose this was. Oh, it's oil cooler hose from Napa. I just bought a section of it. I forget what the size is. But yeah, it goes right to there. These are just general heater core hoses. There is a reducer there because the water pump outlets are a little bit different size than the heater core. So there's a reducer there. The other one just goes, I think these were like 90 universal heater hoses, and then I just kind of cut them to size, and they go right into the water pump. Let's see what else from the top. I think that's pretty much it. I covered accessories, intake, Silverado. That's a Silverado ECM, TCM. They mount in the factory location. I think that's pretty much it for the top of what we ran. So let's go down below here. All right. I just did an oil change, so there is some clean stuff under here. So let's cover oil system. So I could not fit an oil filter off of my oil pan, so I'm running it's a Moroso oil pan, but I'm not sure if they specifically make it. I have it in the parts list. I bought it from a hot rod shop that kind of makes this for some hot rods, but as you could see, it fits in here without any modifications. You can use a Holley oil pan, but you have to cut it up to clear the front diff. If you're running two-wheel drive, you don't even have to cut it up. I would run the Holley because it's cheaper. This is a pretty expensive oil pan, but it's just a matter of how your welding skills are. I mean, if you've got some good welding skills, you could probably get away with doing the holly pan and just cutting it and getting it to where it clears around the diff. I would do that if I had the welding skills, but I didn't trust mine enough to keep it sealed well enough to keep the oil in there, so I did not attempt it. But it would be nice because I think that would have more. The only bad thing I'm not a fan of with this oil pan is the capacity. This drops the capacity to 5 quarts. It's nice because it saves money, but going back to the beginning of the video, I do 3,000 mile oil changes because of that, and because I'm not running a cooling system for the oil. But what I did is when I run this pan, I have, I believe it's called a Cool Master. So there's a fitting called a Cool Master that screws to where the oil filter would go. And then I have some AN adapter lines. It's kind of dirty right now, but basically there's threaded inserts that allow you to run fittings. And then I have drop downs with 90 ANs. I have oil lines that run up through here. They're actually attached to a bracket up there so that they don't bounce around, and then goes to a remote oil filter. So this is kind of what I'm using as a cooler. This is also protected by the skid plate. I don't have the skid plates on at the moment because I just did the oil change. But yeah, so I have the oil filter here. It gets protected by the skid plate. And then airflow hits this to kind of cool it off. Haven't had any issues with it. I change the oil every 3,000 miles just to, kind of make sure that it stays fresh in there. And it's been good for the last 12,000 miles. I did plug this is where the original oil cooler is. I have these plugged up. Another reason I didn't run, I thought about I could run the AN lines into the oil cooler and still run an oil cooler even with the remote oil setup. But one of the issues is this is still my V6 radiator. I bought another one, but I had some issues trying to find some fittings, and I couldn't get the oil cooler to reseal well enough to run it. So I had to put back in my stock one. And those that don't know, I blew my V6, got mud in the oil, which means there's likely mud in this cooler. So I didn't even want to run it with the new engine, so I just basically bypassed it. Let's see what else. So transmission, you can kind of see my transmission cooler lines right there. We'll get back over to there, but they run up. There are these sweaty lines here. And I have some AN hardline adapters. There's one right there. So I had that just basically converting the hardline that goes to the transmission cooler, which is actually in the AC condenser on the V6, and then it goes to an AN line. The AN lines run pretty much the same area as the oil cooler lines. They're on a bracket as well. They go across to a thermostat block. The 8L90 has a thermostat block on it. The 8L45 does not. I think that pretty much covers everything under here. Let's go back to the transmission, and then we can talk about that block with the AN lines. So, as you can see, I have been off-roading this thing, so everything's pretty dirty, but we have an improved racing thermostat block off the side of the transmission, and then that allows me to run AN lines. I have a 140 thermostat. You could buy different temperatures for the thermostat for that, but I have a 140 in it now. Seems to work pretty good, but this is the 8L90. I still have a front diff leak from this seal I haven't fixed yet, but I plan to get to that during the Christmas break. Let's see. I'm running the Silverado transfer case. I'm running, I believe, let me see if I can remember this. I believe this is the V6 transmission mount on the stock crossmember with drilled out holes to run the bolts for the 8090. The V6 Colorado bolts will not fit. I do have spacers. You can kind of see at the top. I have a spacer to shift my drivetrain up a tiny bit. Those are actually Peak skid plate spacers. They pushed it up enough that I could clear the front drive shaft. As you can see, I have plenty of room right here. With those spacers not there, this would hit the crossmember. So I just added those spacers. It still keeps the angle pretty good. Those that don't know, when you install a whole new drivetrain, you do got to worry about your angles of your drivetrain in relation to your rear end. So I've adjusted my rear end a little bit. I don't have any angle spacers in there anymore because I do have it off of the blocks. I have Deaver springs, no ZR2 blocks, and the way that dropped it and angled it, my angles are pretty good. I'm running a Adams drive shaft, steel drive shaft. It is actually a tiny bit longer than the factory drive shaft. The V6 drive shaft technically will work. I feel it's a tiny bit too short. Believe it or not, the housing piece between the transmission and the transfer case on the V6 Colorado is actually a lot bigger than the Silverado drivetrain. So the transfer case is actually back a tiny bit farther on the V6, hence the drive shaft being a tiny bit shorter. So my steel one is actually a little bit longer than the factory one. I still have the factory one back there. I have ran the factory one. It seemed to do all right, but I wanted a steel one anyways for off-roading. Front drive shaft is a custom piece by Adams. We did a double cardan so that we could shrink and make this as small as possible so that it did clear the transmission crossmember. But yeah, that seems to work pretty well. I originally had a bracket. Adapter here with another U-joint. I had some vibration issues, which are covered in one of the videos. I thought it was because of the angle of the front differential. Trying to get the correct angle, I just kind of gave up on trying to get the angle right, and I actually had a local shop I bought another front drive shaft, and they were able to cut it out and get this inside. This is actually the front drive shaft piece from the V6 Colorado that's been welded to my steel drive shaft, and yeah, it works perfect now. No adapter needed. It just bolts onto the front diff like stock. I think that pretty much covers the build for the V8. Everything I kind of used, and fuel lines. Almost forgot about that. So this is actually the fuel lines that came with the engine. They come from up at the high pressure fuel pump underneath the intake manifold. They come down to here, and I did AN hardline adapters just like I did on the transmission lines, and then go to AN lines. So these are just AN lines. One's the evap, one's the fuel supply, and then they connect right there. There's some AN what do they call that? I think it's like a quick disconnect fitting that the stock lines go right here. So this is actually a fitting that goes on a quick disconnect, and then this part threads in, and then it has an AN adapter on it. So I have that on both lines. Makes a nice clean transition. At the end of the day, if I really wanted to, I could literally rip this entire drivetrain out, and buying a few small pieces that I cut up, I could literally just bolt the V6 back in here if I really wanted to. Let's see. I think that's pretty much gonna cover everything. I will do a kind of full build video here soon, but I just wanted to kind of cover what all was used for the V8 swap in one kind of collective video. Because if you go through my episodes, there's probably going to be some items that I cover that I didn't necessarily end up with due to probably some stuff discovered later on in the build. I think that pretty much covers it. So I'll go ahead and end it here, and I'll try to get a kind of full build video showing, all the suspension components and everything else I'm running, and get that up. So, like always, if there's any questions or anything, post them up in the comments. I'll try to get to them and catch you guys on the next one.